Hello and welcome to another episode of Angel Insights, the show that dives deep into the world of early stage investing by chatting with the investors, operators, and startup founders. I'm your host, Tom Britton, co-founder of SyndicateRoom, and on today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Louise Parlons Bentata, co-founder and CEO of Bluemethane, to the show. Louise, it's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Last time we had Cocoon on the show and we were talking a lot about removal of CO2, and today we're going to switch gears a bit and talk about methane. Now, I'll be honest, before looking into what you did and doing a bit of research, I didn't know how big of a problem methane was. So before we dive into what you do, could you just give us a bit of an overview of the methane problem?
Methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. It's between 28 and 84 times more potent, which means when it's in the atmosphere, it absorbs that much more heat than a CO2 molecule.
When you say it's absorbing heat, we're obviously talking about global warming here. So can you just break down for us about what percentage of global warming can be attributed to methane?
Methane is contributing between 25 and 30% of global warming to date. It's a massive contributor, but it doesn't last very long in the atmosphere, only about 9 to 12 years, which means, wow, if you can cut it now, you can actually make a quite big impact in our lifetime on near-term warming. And because it has such a higher global warming potential that compared to CO2, actually it's a big impact if you can cut methane emissions today.
Given just how big of a problem methane is, when you mentioned 25 to 30% of global warming, why is it that when you look at the news and you speak to people, all they seem to talk about is carbon dioxide and they don't ever mention methane?
There is an element of how much research has gone into it. So carbon dioxide has had more awareness, it's had more research and money towards it. But what we see is that we have a technology which is addressing a methane challenge, and methane is 25 to 30% of global warming so far, and yet it gets just under 1% of climate investment share. And that means that you can have a great technology, but it's the financing, it is financial incentives that are really the innovation that is necessary. And I see that a lot, that it is not about technology, it's about creating markets.
Now we've got a bit of an understanding of just how big a problem methane is. Let's dive into Bluemethane. Where did the idea come from?
Out of an article in The Guardian where the headline was hydropower reservoirs emit 1 billion tons of greenhouse gases. And the greenhouse gas they were talking about was methane. My co-founder was really surprised because he was working in hydropower at the time and hadn't heard anything to that effect before. And so that led us on to exploring where are all the other sources of liquid that are emitting methane. And that made us understand, wow, the problem of methane emissions coming from bodies of water like reservoirs and rice cultivation and lagoons, even catastrophically, it could be melting permafrost. That's a massive problem. So either you can capture it when it's already up in the atmosphere, and when people are thinking about methane, they're always thinking about cows burping and farting, or they might be thinking about oil and gas. So when it's in the atmosphere, its parts per million are so small, it's really hard and nobody's doing it. So let's try and prevent it going into the atmosphere where it's incredibly hard to capture. And instead, if we can reduce those emissions from the source of water on the ground, then we have a better chance.
I'm curious, how did you meet your co-founder? What brought the two of you together?
Nesta is a Colombian based in the Netherlands. And he had his own engineering consulting company. And he was thinking about this idea, like mulling it over, and decided after a very warm winter in Europe of 1919, 1920, that he needed to try and do something good for the planet. And in parallel, I am a Brit who had been running my own marketing strategy company for about 10 years. And I was getting frustrated that something that was really valuable yesterday was put in landfill today and worth nothing. And I couldn't get my head around it. So that's why I went back and did my postgrad. I thought, well, how can I understand value chains to see? And I said to him, right, can I do a project on this to see how this is not going to go in landfill and keep its value? And he said, no, you're not qualified. I thought, right, I'm going to get qualified and did this postgrad. having come out of it, I then didn't want to go back to my marketing strategy work and wanted to see whatever skills I had, I'd apply them to this climate. I don't know what the thing was. And I signed up for a climate technology fellowship, and Nesta happened to sign up as well. So it was a global thing, went online because of COVID, and we met on like the first day of the program in March 2021. This is still deep COVID. And then after a few weeks, okay, let's do 3 weeks together, half days, because we both still had the thing that pays our mortgages. And then in May 2021, his wife turned around and said, go and ask her, go and ask her. She could be a co-founder. And so in May, we gave up the thing that pays our mortgages and founded Bluemethane, having never met in person. It's just so bonkers. And we actually met for the first time in September 2021 on the platform at King's Cross on our way to the first Carbon 13 session.
And then you got onto the program.
Yeah.
And talk to me about how the idea evolved through the program.
The idea, the technology idea actually remained very similar. But what changed was in our thinking was the quantification of climate impact. So working with particularly Nikki D on an early LCA, a life cycle assessment of how much impact can we have and what is the impact of our technology in itself, as in what is the carbon impact of us building it and then deploying it. So there was a good quantification exercise and some really good mentorship. The biggest impact of the program for us was that neither Nesta nor I had ever fundraised before. So the whole fundraising market was like foreign as anything, such that we were told about term sheets and I was like, never heard of them. So it was a forcing function through a first fundraise where I felt that we really had our hands held. That was the most valuable part. We would not have got ready in that time frame unless we were forced to.
From a practical perspective, so I'm assuming that he's back in Holland still and you're in the UK, or did he decide to stay?
So then he moved to Antwerp, where he has been until 2 weeks ago when he has moved to London. Now our whole team has gone from being remote to he is now the last and the final piece of the puzzle of everybody being in person.
Fantastic. And how big's the team?
We are 8 people.
Ah, congrats. Let's talk about the tech because we haven't talked about that at all. And I'm very curious into kind of how it works, what the process is. So if you could explain it to someone who does not have an engineering background, what would you say it is and how it works?
We began by thinking, how can we remove low concentrations of methane, because it's not massive there, low concentrations of methane from massive volumes of water using the least energy possible and at the lowest cost. So that's how we set Bluemethane up to be. And there are lots of ways you can remove methane from a liquid. You could heat it up. That takes quite a lot of energy. You could add chemicals to stuff. There is chemistry and physics and biology. And our approach has been physics, because that for us is the lowest energy way. So we try and remove the most methane with the least energy. Our system works like this. Imagine you are holding a bottle of sparkling water. Before you open it, you don't see the dissolved bubbles. If you shake it and then you open the lid, that we all know what happens. But you have done two things. The opening of the lid is a sudden change in pressure, and then by shaking it, you've speeded up the process of those bubbles coming out once the lid's off. And we do those two things. A sudden change in pressure, like the opening of the lid, and we agitate it. And by doing so, like your bottle of sparkling water, the bubbles come up, and they come up faster because we have agitated it. So that's it. We have physical agitation. We're like your bottle of sparkling water.
That's a great analogy, but I'm curious, how do you do that when you're working with such a large volume of water? How do you agitate those? And how do you change the pressure on something like that?
You can change the pressure by adding a light vacuum, or if you make it to change the thicknesses of the pipes, you can change the pressure going through. We began at reservoirs and have got really good traction there, but it's slow because it's infrastructure. It's not equipment. It's not like a toaster kind of thing. And along this journey, we've had much stronger market pull from water companies in the UK, industrial wastewater in Europe, landfill management, where they have a problem that needs solving today, as opposed to reservoirs, which they're not having. It's not a problem they need to solve today because it's not regulated. So we shifted our focus away from the large bodies of water, but kept the principle of the technology the same. So now we have a small units, which go into water utility companies and biogas plants, and soon hopefully a landfill company. So it isn't the problem of large bodies of water at the moment. And even if it gets to large bodies, Tom, it's not a problem for us because we've started at scale and we're going down as opposed to the other way up.
Okay. So let's take a hypothetical project, or if you want to share a real one that you're doing right now. Like, would Cambridge Water, I live in Cambridge, Cambridge
Okay.
Water has to do something with their wastewater, and
Um,
you would engage them to effectively treat the wastewater to remove the methane?
Cambridge is actually within Anglian Water, and our
Anglian water.
first deployment is going to be with Anglian Water in March. So that's
Yes.
a lucky guess. So they have their wastewater, and then they have something called bioresources, which is where the solid waste that goes to the end to get treated. And all the water companies, they treat it anaerobically. So that means they put it in a system which has got no oxygen, and it produces methane. It like ferments, a bit like it acts just like a cow's stomach. It ferments, and then they collect methane. So all these sites, like the one in Cambridge, are already collecting methane to use for energy. And then they have at the end of it, it's like their waste stream. But the methane creating bacteria, they don't know that they've left the digester, and they just keep producing a bit more methane. So what we're doing is preventing the residual methane from being emitted. So we are really sweeping the floor and taking everybody's waste, which adds up to billions of
Billions
tons.
of tons of methane.
Yeah, it does, because wastewater, rice cultivation, which is also quite small for a lot of the fields, we could say, it's estimated to be 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent of methane coming out of reservoirs, wastewater, and rice cultivation.
And if we just narrowed it down to that Anglian water example, maybe there's what, 500,000 people that the water is supplied from for that size of plant.
Yeah, probably a bit more, maybe a couple of million.
What is the CO2 equivalent of the methane from that size of plant?
We prevent several hundred tons of CO2 equivalent. So we're not. So it's why we're an equipment manufacturer, not at the moment. We're not changing all infrastructure. You just plug us on the side. We reduce your emissions by a few hundred tons. We can do it across all your sites, and it adds up to several 100,000 across the UK. So you plug us in like a toaster.
Plug and play.
It's yeah,
good to go.
Yeah, pretty much. A little bit of plumbing, like a pipe here and a pipe there, but it's low drama. We're very low drama. Nothing else changes when we get there. In fact, the site we were on didn't even pause when we arrived.
Amazing. And what happens though to the methane once you've captured it? You've mentioned that they're capturing it, using it for energy sources, but so you pull out your machine and you get these several hundred tons of CO2 from the Anglia water. What do you do with the methane?
So we don't just get, and like the site, they don't just get methane, they get biogas, which is a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide together. We get whatever mixture they've got in their last process. So if you've got 50-50 of methane and CO2, we're likely to get that as well. And we just give it to them. So we just add it into their existing biogas collection. So we kind of reduce their methane emissions, and we give them a bit more biogas.
Okay. And just for those who aren't aware, what are they using the biogas for?
They'll either use it for two things. They'll either burn it on site to create electricity, and that will likely be used for their on-site procedure, like whatever they use, but also go into the electricity grid. Or they'll upgrade it, which means they make it more valuable, they make it 100%, or basically biomethane, and they can inject that into the gas grid. So when you turn on your gas cooker at home, you don't know whether it's natural gas from fossil fuels or whether it's biomethane. It's the same chemical.
So it's recycling it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it very circular, actually, because you permanently destroy the methane by by burning it.
So I'm curious, you mentioned that obviously the machines, your technology that gets installed requires a bit of energy, but you're also capturing what is effectively turned into energy. What's the net on that?
So we have run one system end of last year, and that is an important part of understanding how at scale what our system will do. And he was called Harvey, the methane harvester. So Harvey, the methane harvester, which was in a site on the Isle of Wight at the end of last year, he captured 20 times as much carbon in the methane that we removed than we did took in the energy to run the system, which means that the operating energy is zero for running our system. So we remove energy, we remove carbon, and we do it at zero energy cost.
How big is the market for this if we just look at the UK? Because obviously every council, every region has at least one wastewater facility. And that's what it seems to be the initial target market. How big is the audience for this in the UK?
So in the UK, there are 10 water companies in about 140 sites where we could be deployed. They have a new regulation that comes in at the end of March. So they have to cover their tanks that weren't covered and collect their residual methane. So they're going to buy our technology to meet regulatory compliance, and we will do it better than any other way, cost effectively than they can.
Wow.
And there's also landfill. So landfill leachate, which still has some methane in it before it's because that needs to be discharged to sewers or groundwater. And so that has to have the methane stripped out of it. So that there's other regulatory driven. So landfills one, UK water companies are another. And those are our two main regulatory compliance driven markets. The one on the Isle of Wight is interesting because it's not compliance driven. So why would they even do it? They don't have to remove this last bit of methane. They don't have to measure their scope 3 emissions, which is your downstream emissions. So you'd only do it if they could be compensated for it. Like, is there a cost? Is there a value to them? Could they be paid to do it? And that is where voluntary carbon markets come in.
What's your journey look like from a fundraising perspective? I'm curious because typically you look at startups that are like SaaS based and you're like, oh yeah, you can raise this much and then raise a bit more and you hire more salespeople and more marketing people and you develop the technology. But you're a hardware solution.
Yeah, so we raised Carbon 13 was our first investor. And then we then completed a pre-seed round just after that. We are raising our seed round at the moment, which reflects our technology and commercial roadmap. So we are deploying our industrial pre-commercial unit. And so we are going to be commercializing this year. Like we are selling units this year to companies who need to meet regulatory compliance. And in parallel, we are working on a journey for all the people who don't have to do it, but could do it. How would they be compensated, which is the carbon markets, the voluntary part of the carbon revenue. So we're raising now seed round, and that'll take us quite far into commercialization, which for us is not just the UK, but across Europe and the US.
Mentioning the US, we have a climate denier as president. Have you seen the appetite change since he's come to office? I appreciate it's only been a little more than a month, but are you still getting very strong interest from across the pond?
Since he got elected, I can detect difference. So everywhere there is more uncertainty. The things that I have noticed, and for my little myopic slice of the pizza, investors less willing to price around. So they don't want to be the ones who give the price. I think higher interest rates have been a challenge as well for people holding on to money. And those who are very broad investors who could invest in oil and gas or invest in a green tech are now going to just do the one which is being supported the most. So I think there's been a really big impact. Like the problem is already there. And if there's more oil and gas, that means there's less money going into climate fixing technology. So oil and gas has such a low levelized cost of energy because it's so mature. And so, of course, it's so much cheaper to do it. So let's just do that because it's so cheap to do. But to make all the other technologies, which are things we can fix the problem, they do need a bit more time to get to their lower levelized cost of whatever they're doing of energy production. And so it is really a hard time for the tech that is doing good because it does need longer, and therefore it does need that investment, and it's not going there. So much of it's going into oil and gas now.
It's a shame.
I have to think, though, it comes with, it's not all doom and gloom. I feel that it becomes more important for the voluntary carbon markets, for customer-driven organizations, B2C, who are, I don't know, selling shampoos and then need to make their supply chains net zero by a time that they've given, 2030, let's say. Then that does force down the supply chain. People have to start having to be net zero in the absence of regulation.
On that though, with regulation and policy, the UK has a very strong green agenda, it seems, with the government that's come in. But what more needs to be done here on that policy and regulation side of it to continue ensuring that green companies, startups, developed ones get the support that they need and the opportunities that they need for the UK to become a green shining light for the rest of Europe and eventually the US when they come around to it again?
Government innovation grants are a strong catalyzer of moving technology from ideas to a thing. I think there's a middle step, which is still a challenge, which is you've got a really good technology, you have de-risked it to somewhat, but actually it's not quite for anything, but it's still not ready for private investment, let's say. So that's quite a challenging area where lots of technologies find that they go under. More macro scale, interest rates are, I think, a big challenge because that's just a competitor for where money goes.
Okay.
And then I fly the flag for methane. So try to raise awareness, but it's very, very potent gas that is also so amazing because it's a source of energy. Can't say that for carbon dioxide.
No, it's just misery, carbon dioxide. Just rolling it back a second, you talked about this year being the year for commercialization. You've got a bunch of projects on the go.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a few years. So talk me through what success looks like in 3 to 5 years. What needs to happen? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to achieve it?
We will have installations of our units. She'll be called Jenny. She's the generator. Jenny will be recovering methane from industrial wastewater treatment sites in Europe, UK, in municipal wastewater treatment sites as well, in both from starting with regulatory and then for non-regulatory different markets. And we will have got closer to what we call frontier markets, which is the reservoirs, the melting permafrost, where there's catastrophic amounts of methane. Like where we are now, it's important, but it touches the sides. But the real problem is when permafrost melts, and then all other sources of methane become insignificant. And that's where we see we may have this technology that could help prevent all that methane going up.
Amazing. What will be the name of that size of machine? Because you've had Harvey, and then the evolution being Jenny.
Actually, we have Stephanie. Stephanie's going to Anglian Water, and then our first commercial unit is going to be called Jenny.
What's Stephanie
after
then?
that, Stephanie's our industrial scale pre-commercial unit, still like a pilot.
So you've got Harvey Harvester, Jenny Generator, Steph.
Yeah, it's because of a particular design element. I won't go into it now. But then after that, we're debating between two. I want Austin for Austin Powers, but what I found is that not everyone's seen the film, or Watson for Watts for energy. But
Watson's been used before. You've got like IBM's Watson and such.
Good point.
Austin Powers, right?
It was so good. Such a good film, though.
It was, definitely. Well, look, it's been fantastic having you on the show. For those that want to find out more about what you do and how you do it, where should they go? What should they do?
Connect on LinkedIn. Send us an email to hello@bluemethane.com.
Excellent. And I'm sure that people will be able to join a newsletter and hear about the updates.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show and learning all about methane, the problem, and what you're doing about it. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I think it'd be really nice to revisit this in, say, a year's time and see how the progress with Jenny has been and her success. So I look forward to having another conversation in 12 months or so.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this episode of Angel Insights. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you did enjoy the show, we encourage you to like or subscribe. And if you want to find out more about what we're doing at SyndicateRoom, please head on over to www.syndicateroom.com. We hope to see you next time.